The election of 1912 is one of the most important elections in American history. Here we see a debate about the views of the relationships between politics and economics. This was due to the rise of big businesses in the Gilded Age, which increased the gap between the wealthy and the poor. At this time, both the Republicans and the Democrats were also fighting to see who would be the more progressive party as they shift away from the old guard. In June of 1912, the Republicans met to decide who would be the Republican nominee for the upcoming election. The old guard, who controlled the Republican convention, voted for William Taft to run for presidency again. They picked him because he was closer to the old guard side and could be easier swayed than Theodore Roosevelt. There was already tension between the two after Taft fired Gifford Pinchot, a friend of Roosevelt. Many Republicans who were more on the progressive side than the old guards wanted to nominate Theodore Roosevelt instead. When Taft won the nominee, about 344 delegates left the convention. William Taft was president in 1908. He passed the 16th Amendment, which created income tax. He also pursued more antitrust cases than Roosevelt. But because he wanted to be a judiciary, he was more moderate and thought about things longer, making him less appealing than Roosevelt. His stance was that economic individualism could remain the foundation of social order. The government and entrepreneurs should cooperate. The Progressive Party was created out of the Republicans who walked out of the Republican convention. It is somewhat inaccurate to call them the Progressive Party because there were progressives in all the parties. There was no actual Progressive Party itself because unlike the Populists, they weren't unified with their views. The Progressive Party was also known as the Bull Moose Party. Their nominee was Theodore Roosevelt. He became president after McKinley was shot and did want to run again in 1908 because then he would serve more years than Washington and Jefferson, who set the president at the time. He endorsed Taft in 1908 but disagreed with his term because he wasn't as progressive. Roosevelt had a plan called New Nationalism. It said only the controlling power of the government could restore the liberty of the oppressed. He called for heavy taxes on personal and corporate fortunes and federal regulation of big businesses like the railroads. The big businesses would work with the government because they were scared of complete government control. Socialism was an idea that came out of Europe from Karl Marx's The Communist Manifesto. Their nominee was Eugene Debs of the Pullman Railroad strike. Some may say that he wanted to abolish capitalism since socialism was the Marxist stage before communism.
The party ran on the following ideas: tax reforms like graduated income tax, increase of tax rates to present corporations, minimum wage by establishing a minimum wage scales, direct election of presidents by direct vote, social insurance for workers like unemployment, and compulsory insurance for workers.
The Democrats saw progressivism as a way for the Democrats to be important again after a long Republican rule.
Woodrow Wilson was the candidate for the Democratic Party, served as president of Princeton University and later as governor of New Jersey.
He believed that democracy should work alongside market competition and would free government from big businesses. His plan, called the New Freedom, strengthened antitrust laws and protected unions without increasing government regulation of the economy. He threatened to break up trusts and, if necessary, use government control to take over businesses. The old guard Democrats only wanted to protect race discrimination, which Wilson was very okay with. For the most part, Wilson had less problems with the Democrat original guard than Roosevelt did with the Republicans.
All candidates ran in a progressive mindset. By the split of the Republican Party, Woodrow was able to obtain 40 states with 41.8% of the vote and was the first one to win consecutive terms since Andrew Jackson.
The election shows that about 60% of the population are progressives and not part of the old guard anymore. The Bull Moose Party dies out by 1916 as members return to the Republican side, but Taft and the old guards controlled the party until 1928. Wilson also abandons New Freedom and uses a form of New Nationalism, but his presidency is overshadowed by the chaos in Europe leading to World War I.